We're now joined by Ndzalama Mathebula, Assistant Lecturer at the Politics and International Relations Department at the University of Johannesburg. And she joins us via our video link. Ndzalama, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Of course, we are now well in the way of the BRICS Summit. It is indeed the second day. Maybe give us your thoughts so far on the BRICS Summit.
So the BRICS Summit, this has been hailed to be a very historic summit since the COVID pandemic, but not only that, but because of the global transformation it is bringing forth. So what you find is there's so much of countering of the Western hegemony, and I do believe that topics that aim to counter this hegemony and de-dollarize are now coming to the forefront, and they're dominating the agenda of this BRICS summit.
And certainly, as that actually dominates the BRICS summit, at the same time, leaders today agreeing on the expansion for BRICS and, of course, getting more partners on board. What does that mean for the global south? Should we see, the expansion of BRICS?
So most definitely it means a multipolar world system where there will be power dynamics that are shared throughout many of the countries. So it also means inclusivity in terms of development and tailoring the global agenda going forward. So what this means really, it's having many of the countries, many emerging markets and countries being key players in shaping the nature and of the global dialogue going forward. So it's not in them inheriting, but rather shaping what is to be after this BRICS summit.
At the same time, something you touched on, Ndzalama, is the issue of the de-dollarization. We now saw today, especially from President Cyril Ramaphosa, touching a lot on that issue and, the growing interest here for BRICS to have their own currency. One would ask, these countries all have their own currency. Should we see them, agreeing to have some sort of a currency to work between these nations? How does that look like? How will that work?
So I do believe that that's still underway. They're still discussing on how a BRICS currency would look like, what they would call the R5. But then I do believe that in the meantime, they're also having talks towards using or dissolving the dominance of the dollar in trade and bilateral trade and many of the monetary corporations throughout the world. So what this means is you have countries now opting for their local currencies in terms of trade and investment as compared to using the dollar, because with the de-dollarization is a bit more complex and it would need time as to how it will be backed up, what commodities would back it up, how it would work, would it be convertible? So I do believe that would need more research and a clear framework on how that would work. But at the same time, I do believe what is possible now is for them to work with their local currencies.
And of course, this will benefit many nations, especially developing nations.
Most definitely. So what you find is BRICS is a counter, or is the opposite, or is the consequence of Western hegemony. So then whatever dialogues it would have, it would counter and ensure that it is the opposite of what the world has inherited since the end of the World War II. So it would definitely benefit many of the emerging economies, because all the countries that are there are emerging economies in themselves, with China being a rising power.
What will this mean for trade between these countries? I mean, this was also a hot topic, the increasing of trade between, the BRICS bloc.
I do believe that it would make trade much more easier when you do it in your local currencies. That would work best in many of the countries that you find in BRICS, but also I do believe that this would deepen ties, economic and political ties between the countries going forward. So then it would actually foster so much of engagement within the BRICS bloc itself and growing the economic and political weight of these countries as they are doing so, pumping on the economic development.
And of course, when these nations clearly focus on growing their economies, what is the potential of the BRICS bloc becoming some sort of superpower, especially in the global south?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because it would be unpleasant to have hegemony, to have many of the African countries and other emerging markets still being subordinates to a new global order. So I do believe that in order for us all countries to actually avoid that, they need to be in the forefront and they need to position themselves within this new global order that can actually enable them to see through their national interests, to see through their foreign policy and the developmental agenda of their country. So this is not the time for countries to be passive bystanders, but rather they need to be at the forefront to ensure that they're not left behind and they're not subordinates to a new superpower or hegemony.
And as the summit comes to a close tomorrow, what are your expectations for the final day of the BRICS summit?
So there will be much of a discussion with the energy and everything that has been discussed, but what I'm also looking forward to mainly is the outcome of the BRICS and the conclusions that they will have at the summit and how that will then shape the new global order, or what we would call the BRICS order, going forward. So I do look forward to how the decisions that are taken there tomorrow will then shape what we know in the world.
All right, Ndzalama, thank you so much for your time here on the Late Edition. That is Ndzalama Mathebula. She is an assistant lecturer at Politics and International Relations Department at the University of Johannesburg.